Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here, and in today's video I'll be going over Dan Quinn's opening press conference with the Washington Commanders, where he talked with Adam Peters and Josh Harris to the media about the coaching staff, Eric Bieniemy, the coordinators, and much more. Gonna recap it all in today's video. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well, and comment down below what you thought of the press conference. Alrighty, so let's talk about the press conference. It was a very, very long press conference. I was taking a test during it, so just got back, watched almost all of it, maybe the last 10 minutes, but I was able to see most of the things that were said after that on Twitter. Yeah, I don't remember the Ron Rivera press conference being that long. I believe it was this one was 57 minutes. There was a lot of interesting things, nothing crazy, but some information that was useful and questions that were answered, including will Dan Quinn call plays, will Eric Bieniemy be back, stuff like that, where we maybe knew the answer but not completely. So let's get into it. Overall, I thought Dan Quinn was a good speaker. He seems like a really cool guy, seems like a fun guy, was trying to avoid cursing as much as possible, but he said that's going to be hard to do because he does curse a lot. Didn't have the backwards hat on there, but when he walked into the facility, he did have the backwards hat on. So that's a staple for Dan Quinn. And then again, just seemed like a chill guy, and went to Salisbury, which is, I think it's in Maryland, I believe. I'm not completely sure, but it's close here. I think he said 2 hours south, but for some reason I thought it was in Maryland. And then he coached at VMI, William & Mary, where they had Mike Tomlin, Sean McDermott. I think there was Darren Sharper there as well. So a lot of guys there when he was coaching there. So he's got a lot of experience as a coach, and as played college football, even though it wasn't at a high level, he did play, so he does understand, and ran track there as well. He talked about that, was well spoken, did have some sayings like "be where your feet are" or something like that, which gave me a little bit of PTSD from when Ron Rivera said that in his opening press conference. And it is what it is. There are, though, a lot of similarities between Ron Rivera and Dan Quinn, and there's a lot of differences, but some of the similarities: both had an MVP quarterback, and during that MVP quarterback season, they went to the Super Bowl and lost. And they both coached in the NFC South, and both were right above 500 before they went to their second stint. And both were defensive guys, and both are kind of players, coaches. There's differences as well, but there's a lot of similarities. And one of the similarities is that, we'll get into the Eric Bieniemy thing in a bit. Dan Quinn says his coordinators will call plays that's expected on offense. I was thinking it's going to be the defense. I thought Dan Quinn was going to call the defense, so it's another similarity. Ron Rivera said, Jack Del Rio, you call the plays, and now Dan Quinn's doing the same thing with Joe Witt Jr., who I'm going to make a video on him a little bit later, maybe tomorrow. Everything you need to know about him, everything you need to know about Cliff Kingsbury. But that was, something that was a little bit surprising. I thought Dan Quinn was going to call plays. I wanted him to call plays because, again, he is a defensive guy. Did a really good job with the Seahawks, with the Cowboys. And, yeah, we'll see what Joe Witt does. I believe Dan Quinn hired him in Atlanta and Dallas. So is a guy that, Dan Quinn has ties to. But, someone that's familiar with him, which I guess can be good and bad. We saw with Ron Rivera, maybe brought in too many guys he was familiar with. And but Cliff Kingsbury is, they don't really have a connection in terms of coaching. They know each other. They're, they're friendly apparently. That's what he talked about in the press conference. But besides that, nothing crazy. Another thing which Commando Bando said here: keep the main thing the main thing. He talked about that. He talked about some position groups that intrigued him: the interior defensive line and the receivers. The roster is not great now, so there's not a lot to be excited about. But he did talk about that, which is interesting. And he said he wants to build the fronts up, the defensive line, the offensive line. This draft is very, very good for offensive line. So you take your quarterback at 2, okay. But I think in your top 5 picks, minimum 2 of them need to be an offensive lineman. I know you want to do best player available. Well, this draft, there's so many good offensive linemen. You can completely rebuild an offensive line with day 2 picks, which we have, 4 of them. We have 4 of them. So take 2 offensive linemen. I would take 1 in the second round, maybe 2 in the second round, and just try to develop that offensive line quick, because you can get these guards, these tackles, especially guards, to play well right away within their first year. And I say draft 2 to 3 offensive linemen in this draft and 2 in the top 100 picks. I think it's very important. We rebuilt this offensive line. I saw a tweet from Daniel Jeremiah today saying that if you want to rebuild your offensive line, this is the year to do it. So that's great for us. So we don't necessarily need to do it in the first round. Maybe we take our quarterback and then trade up a little bit because, again, we have that second round pick, which is going to be, it's the second pick in the second round. So maybe we can trade up into that late first round and grab another offensive lineman grab a offensive lineman, something like that. That's something we can talk about later, but he wants to build the fronts, the offensive and defensive line. I think that's very, very important, and I love that he's saying that, but most coaches are going to say that. Update, not surprising at all. Maybe to some people that aren't Commanders fans it's surprising, or they don't agree with it. Eric Bieniemy not going to be back with the Commanders in 2024. Dan Quinn confirmed. I'm totally fine with it. I know a lot of people, or some people wanted him back. It didn't really work out last year, and it wasn't all him, but it's definitely he contributed to the offense not being great. And again, there were other things like the quarterback, the offensive line, some of the playmakers, but I think Eric Bieniemy definitely played a part into it. And some of the players had issues with him. We heard in the offseason, at the end of the season. And I think it's just better to get a fresh start. So maybe he'll get a job with the Raiders. I think he interviewed, or they're potentially going to interview him, or he'll get a job somewhere. But I think it is the right move to move on and just clean house of the coaches that were here. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guys that they like. I don't know, maybe Randy Jordan or one of the position coaches, but for the most part, I think they're going to clean house, and I would be surprised if more than a couple guys are back from this coaching staff. Adam Peters did say that the front office is going to stay the same throughout the draft, maybe some minor changes, and as long as that doesn't continue into next year's draft, that's fine, but I don't want to have Marty Hurney here. Eric Stokes doesn't need to be here. Mayhew, not a huge fan of him, but if Adam Peters wants to stick with him because he worked with him in San Francisco, that's fine. That's fine with me. And I think they probably have a good communication, so Mayhew can give him a good idea of where the roster's at, strengths and weaknesses of each player. And who knows how much Mayhew and them really did, because, again, Rivera was the one making the decisions, and maybe even Dan Snyder was making some of those decisions as well. So just something to keep in mind for the Washington Commanders. Let's see what else. He talked about Cliff Kingsbury a little bit. Reminds him of the decision to hire Kyle Shanahan years back in Atlanta. I like that. And he said they're tough to go against. He said it was always tough going against Cliff Kingsbury. So you like to hear that, not hiring him because he's a buddy or he worked with him before. He wants to get him a job. No, he thinks he's a good coordinator. And when they played in the past, it was a tough job. It was a tough job game planning. I think a lot of national media and national fans that are, not national fans, but fans that aren't Commanders fans of other NFL teams are not liking the Cliff Kingsbury hire. But if you look at it, like their offenses, everywhere he's gone, they've done pretty well. And head coaching is very different from being an offensive coordinator. He didn't do an amazing job with the Cardinals in terms of head coaching, but their offense was usually pretty good. And it was more the leadership questions there with Cliff. But as a coordinator, I think he'll do a really, really good job here in Washington. I think he'll do a good job. I'm not sure about. All right, and it got cut off, but I was just basically saying I think Cliff will be a good offensive coordinator. There is some potential of it going really bad, but I don't think so. I think it'll be good with Cliff. He's done good job with Texas Tech, with Arizona as an offensive guy. He was doing good there, and then worked with USC this past year. That's hard to tell because he's not calling the plays. But that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys are new, and peace.